Darth Sidious was the ultimate culmination of the Rule of Two, and in some way, the culmination of the Sith Order themselves. However, in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, in the same opera scene in Revenge of the Sith, Darth Sidious has a fateful admittance about his order, as Darth Sidious divulges to Anakin Skywalker what he believes to be the true and ultimate weakness of the Sith. Greetings again, curious acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. Among Sith Lords of the past, perhaps there has never been a Sith more zealous for the dark side than Sidious. Sheev Palpatine was a man who grew to witness the power of the dark side firsthand, and would sell himself to it completely in order to harness its power, along with the knowledge of every past Sith Lord in order to become the Emperor of a new galaxy. And while he was at it, he accomplished what none of his predecessors could: destroy the Jedi. We are all aware of Sidious's sheer hatred for the Jedi, mostly because of how their hypocritical stance in the galaxy differs from his own. He could see that they loved power just as much as the Sith did, but that they refused to acknowledge that fact or use their powers to subjugate the galaxy and rule such as gods. Because of this contempt for the Jedi, he often placed the Sith Order as superior in every single way, except for one. There was a single time when Darth Sidious conceded to one truth: the truth that the Sith and the Jedi both shared a particular weakness. So, come along with us today, acolytes of the Force, as we open up yet another holocron and listen to what Sidious himself said was the only weakness of the Sith Order. This knowledge comes to us again thanks to the Revenge of the Sith novelization, which we've been taking a deep dive into recently. This conversation is when Palpatine is having a bit of a philosophical discussion with Anakin about the nature of the Jedi and the Sith. This is an expanded version of their talk during the ballet, right before the Chancellor decides to tell the young Jedi about the tragedy of Plagueis the Wise, one of the most important moments in all of Star Wars. In this conversation, Palpatine is carefully explaining to Anakin what the Sith actually believe, and how they are honestly not too much different from the Jedi besides from the fundamental fork in the road that is the light versus the dark. In this conversation, he is also playing on Anakin's feelings about the current political state of things, as the Senate seemingly is going nowhere with ending the war despite Count Dooku's death. Palpatine gives Anakin a piece of advice, which he calls the first rule of politics, which is as follows: all who gain power are afraid to lose it. The two of them start getting into somewhat of a debate as to the motives of the Jedi and the Sith and how they contrast one another. Anakin does his best to recite the doctrine of his training and what he had been told all of his life growing up in the walls of the temple, but Palpatine manages to shoot down his arguments one after the other. The entire crux of their argument that Palpatine is trying to prove is that the Jedi relax in a seat of power over the entire galaxy, and that it is only a matter of time before they begin to use that seat of power for their own well-being. This is huge for Palpatine and Anakin, as Palpatine is showing his skills as a politician as well as a debater and a manipulator, doing so by using the classic debate tactic of trying to use one common denominator in order to bring the other person over to your perspective and beliefs. In doing so, Sidious finally reveals to us what he believes the weakness of the Sith is, by dropping this bombshell on Skywalker. The fear of losing power is a weakness of both the Jedi and the Sith. While it's an interesting topic all on its own that Palpatine believes the Jedi and Sith share this same weakness, we know that this was more of a manipulation tactic for Anakin when concerning the Jedi side of things. However, the Sith side of this argument can and has actually been proven as verifiably true. Darth Sidious is the culmination of the teachings of all of the past Sith Lords in galactic history. One of his favorite hobbies was to collect dark side artifacts and ancient Sith tomes and items which he had squirreled away in a hidden vault. Sidious had studied the ancient Sith Lords extensively and likely knew the lives of each and every one of them very well, despite his master Darth Plagueis never really teaching Sidious anything about the ancients. Palpatine took it upon himself to learn everything he could about them, and for very good reason. In his research, he would be searching for at first ancient, long-forgotten knowledge of the dark side, but in the process, he would of course learn about the cause of the demise of all of these powerful men and women who served the darkness. The backstabbing nature of the Sith did play a part in it, sure, but that was the reason that the Rule of Two existed: to capitalize on betrayal, which is what the Sith do best. This wasn't the weakness that Sidious saw, but rather saw this as a strength. We all know that Sidious only loosely followed the rule of two, and had several assassins and thralls which he backstabbed all the time when they outlived their usefulness. So to Sidious, this was not a weakness so long as he was staying ahead. But interesting, he states that it is the fear of losing power which caught the eye of Sidious during his studies. And for our own purposes, we can cite the story of Darth and Deddu as being a prime example of this fear. There is such a thing as being too powerful. This is due to the fact that with most people, especially those in the dark side, when they grow exponentially in powers, so too do they grow in fear. When one becomes so powerful that they are nearly a god, then how do they cope with the idea that one day they can lose this all in an instant? Problem is, most don't, especially not Darth and Deddu, as this thought corrupted and changed him. For those of you who remember, Deddu was not only the first person to use the Darth title, but also the person who discovered the secret to immortality, which of course is the ability of essence transfer, also known as dark transfer. And Deddu was a Sith Lord who pioneered many spells and rituals in the dark side, and would write many scrolls and tomes in his lifetime. Though he was by far the most powerful Sith of his age, he grew paranoid, afraid that his followers were plotting against him. This fear turned out to be true, and he got the jump on his followers by faking his death and fleeing to his homeworld of Prakith. There, Deddu would set up his new empire and become the immortal God King of the world. However, again, his paranoia would catch up to him, as he was always terrified that his followers would find him, kill him, seize his knowledge and his throne as their own. This, though, was an illogical fear, because not only had the hyperspace lane to Prakith closed shortly after his arrival, but it had already been several hundred years since he fled the Sith Empire, and his followers would have largely died out. Despite this though, just as Sidious said, Deddu would lock himself with his knowledge inside of a stronghold and eventually die, fearing to lose this power. Perhaps if he had been more brave, he could have reached the entire galaxy with his might. Instead though, he became so much less. Fearing betrayal, he locked himself away, so terrified at losing the power that he gained, and therefore did nothing with it. In the end, much better and more powerful men found out his knowledge and used it for great things, such as Lord Bane and the Baneite lineage. Sidious may have been afraid to lose his power, but he was not so afraid to allow it to cripple him and make him weak like Deddu, even though, at moments, he likely would have liked to hide away. Perhaps Sidious actively fighting against what he called the only weakness of the Sith. But anyway, the fear of losing power is something that is a constant stumbling block for the Sith, and one that Sidious knew of. And who could blame them? The minute that one let their guard down, his fear was recognized. This of course would be Darth Plagueis, who made the mistake of putting far too much trust in an apprentice, and allowing himself to become vulnerable enough around Sidious, which ultimately got him killed. So, our question for you all today is, where is the middle ground? Where is the wise spot between paranoia and wielding one's power? And how should the Jedi and Sith go about curing this common weakness? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, my friends and acolytes, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.